the mutual affection between himself and Miss Reed was revived. And he says that I took her to wife September 1st, 1730. She proved a good and faithful helpmate, assisted me much by attending to the shop. We throve together, and ever mutually endeavored to make each other happy. Thus I corrected that great erratum as well I could. Because you remember that he didn't contact her at all except to say, I won't be coming home anytime soon, sorry. And then wrote no more letters to her. About this time, our club meeting, in their club meeting, the Junto, a proposition was made by me that our books should be sort of gathered together. Not all of them, but maybe our extra ones we have at home. If we would each bring some books that we could spare and have them here at our meeting clubhouse, wouldn't that be great to have a collection of books to look to while we're here speaking? We could consult them instantly. And that would be nearly as beneficial as if each person owned all of the books. So we filled one end of the room with such books as we could best spare. The number was not so great as we expected, and some inconveniences occurring due to the want of care of them, the collection after about a year was separated and each took his books home again. Now, that's like the first example of like a public library. So if you want to put that down as a little note, where did public libraries come from? Ben and his intellectual friends said, let's bring our books together. He says, and now I set my foot on my first project of a public nature, that for a subscription library. By the help of my friends in the Junto, I procured 50 subscribers of 40 shillings each to begin with, and 10 shillings a year for 50 years. This afterwards increased to 100 years, and this was the mother of all North American subscription libraries, now so numerous. The libraries have improved the general conversation of the Americans and made the common tradesmen and farmers as intelligent as most gentlemen from other countries, and perhaps have contributed in some degree to the stand so generally made throughout the colonies in defense of their privileges. Now, this is clear back in 1730 that the Junto clubs meeting and doing these things, and Ben's getting started out as a printer and stuff. 1730s, and the Revolution, the American Revolution, was in 1776. Began in 1775, and the Declaration was in 1776. Now, were Franklin's libraries instrumental in laying the groundwork for the Revolution? He's here claiming that they were. He says after a certain number of years, it became standard that farmers and tradesmen in America were better educated than gentlemen abroad. So could it be that our education, the intelligence of the culture, our assertion of our rights, our protection of our own privileges was created, brought forth, allowed to happen, made possible by Ben Franklin's spreading the use of books far and wide? Interesting question. He claims credit for it here, and I would like to give him credit. So, on to Chapter 6. At the time I established myself in Pennsylvania, those who loved reading were obliged to send for their books from England. The members of the Junto each had a few books. We had left the alehouse where we first met and hired a room to hold our club in. I proposed that we should all of us bring our books to that room, where they would not only be ready to consult in our conference, but become a common benefit, each of us being at liberty to borrow such as he wished to read at home. This was accordingly done, and for some time contented us. So it's like their little library before, except this time it involves all of their books instead of just the ones that they could spare. Now I want to interject here a little bit of note from some tapes that I had about the American Revolution once by George C. Scott, narrated by George C. Scott. It was just the American Revolution, you know, like a 7 hours taped lecture or whatever. It wasn't a lecture, it's read like a book on tape type thing. It's strange. And on these tapes it talks about the culture of the colonies for 1.5 hour bits of them. The culture of the colonies, we can go back and study the will and living testament of people after they died when they died, they left a will. This goes to here and that goes to there. And the manifest or whatever, there's a particular name for it. When the probation, when you die, they take an inventory of all your belongings and write them down as a legal record. And going through these, we find Americans loved books, and they had a very great love for classical literature from ancient Rome and Greece. They were very fond of learning, and it was a point of pride in early America, in colonial America, to possess 3 or 5 or 7 leather-bound volumes, or 2. Any good work you had was a good work. There's Thomas Jefferson's father, I believe, had 40 books in his library. 40. I mean, I've got 50 books in my biography section of my library, and it didn't cost me a penny. So for a guy to spend decades of his life loving learning and only be able to get 40 books together, you can see how on the one hand, how motivated and knowledgeable Americans wanted to be, and on the other hand, how difficult it was to get hold of books. They're expensive. They're very expensive, prohibitively expensive to the poor man. So just want to interject that there was a culture in America of obsession with classical literature and just books. And if you don't think that had something to do with the Revolution. Now, to start this library, he gets these subscriptions, but he needs more. And the more the better, the bigger the library could be. And he says, the objections and reluctances that I met with in soliciting the subscriptions made me soon feel the impropriety of presenting oneself as the proposer of any useful project that might be supposed to raise one's reputation in the smallest degree above that of one's neighbors. In other words, if you're ever proposing a project that would in any way puff your feathers up at all, people are going to object. And he says, when one has the need of their assistance to accomplish that project, they are very, very, you want me to help you do something that'll make you look better? This is absurd, sir. You want me to help you build a library? I can come use the books, but you're the one behind the project. You want me to support you in your project? And he says that was a problem. I therefore put myself as much as I could out of sight, and stated it to be a scheme of a number of friends who had requested me to go about and propose it to such as they thought lovers of reading. A little bit of flattery there. And in this way my affair went on more smoothly. So he comes to you and says, you are a lover of reading, sir. Well, I have a number of friends who have proposed that we undergo this project, blah, 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 blah. Instead of my name's Ben, and I want to open a library, would you contribute some money? Maybe a better culture would be more willing to support rational things. I don't know. And that was a pretty rational culture. Reading was the only amusement I allowed myself. I spent no time in taverns, games, or frolics of any kind, and my industry in my business continued as indefatigable as it was necessary. My original habits of frugality continuing, and my father having among his instructions to me, when a boy, frequently repeated a proverb of Solomon. So he quotes now Solomon, "Seest thou a man diligent in his calling, he shall stand before kings, and shall not stand before mean men." So if you're diligent, you'll be wealthy, and respected, and proper, and noble. I thence considered industry as a means of obtaining wealth, and distinction which encouraged me, though I did not think that I should ever literally stand before kings. Now that's an interesting point. That's why I read this section. I was going to cut it. But then this is pretty interesting, because in Solomon it says, stand before kings. And it turns out, since this has since happened, for I have stood before 5, and even had the honor of sitting down with one, the King of Denmark, to dinner. Interesting. So he literally stood before kings as a result of his diligence, good character, and so forth. The people of America loved him and sent him to be their ambassador to the world. So he stood before kings and gave America's case.